Well, friends and colleagues will honor former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid as he lies in state at the U.S. Capitol today. Reid died last month at the age of 82 after a 4-year battle with pancreatic cancer. The Democrat representing Nevada was elected to the Senate in 1986, and he was the Senate Majority Leader from 2007 to 2015. Reid was known as one of the toughest deal makers in Congress for more than 3 decades. Joel Payne served as Deputy Press Secretary for Senator Reid, and he's also a CBS News political contributor and a Democratic strategist, and joins us this morning. Thanks for joining us, Joel. Senator Reid led the chamber during, a very productive period of legislation, including the passage of the Affordable Care Act. Can you tell us a little bit more about his dedication to policymaking?
Well, I'm so glad that that eulogy this past weekend, which was really heartfelt, I think it focused on the right things. Obviously, there were a lot of personal stories told about interactions with the former majority leader, but most of them talked about how he shunned the spotlight and he was so focused on doing his job. He had a very clear understanding of what the role of a majority leader is, and really it's to count to 60 to get past that filibuster, which I know there's some news about today, which we could talk about later. But then also, how do you make sure you reach all of the members of your caucus? How do you make sure that you find something that works for the member from Delaware and works for the member from California and works for the member from Arkansas? He was a master at that. He understood how to maneuver behind the scenes to find the right touch to make all of those folks feel good. And also being someone from a state like Nevada, right, which I think other than Las Vegas, most people don't understand the sensibilities of a state like Nevada. He understood what it was to be from a place like that. And I think that was able to allow him to connect to a lot of members of his caucus in a really uncommon way. And it made for a really successful policymaker, as you alluded to.
You mentioned his sort of working behind the scenes. Even though he stepped away from the limelight over the past few years, he's actually still stayed pretty involved in politics. What was he doing?
Well, from the national level, I think he was trying to get the Democratic Party to be willing to adjust. He was actually on the forefront of talking about some of the democracy concerns of many members of the progressive base of the party, talking about things like filibuster reform, which you wouldn't expect from someone like Harry Reid, who for a long time was an ardent supporter of the filibuster. He also, back in the state of Nevada, as you can imagine, he was the Democratic Party of the state of Nevada. No Democrat in that state gets the thumbs up without Harry Reid. He's responsible for Senator Rosen, the junior senator from the state. He's responsible for helping support Senator Cortez Masto. And he's responsible for building the Democratic machine in that state, which is heavily reliant on the primary union in the state there of casino workers, and obviously a heavily Spanish-speaking population there as well, that he was able, again, to figure out how do you turn out these people? How do you figure out the right things to unlock the key to political support? He was able to do that at home, and I think that that machine will be his legacy.
So you brought up the filibuster, and speaking of his legacy, Senator Reid famously changed the rules of the Senate. Can you just talk a little bit about what was behind that decision and the lessons, perhaps, that Democrats may want to consider as they, ponder their own change to Senate rules?
Yeah, there's so much revisionist history about that. I think, depending on your perspective, some people might blame Harry Reid for elevating the air war over Senate rules, including the filibuster. But I think those who know understand the reason why he did that is because at the time, Senate Republicans were not allowing any of President Obama's judicial nominees to go forward for reasons that weren't based on any disagreement. They were just doing it for pure political reason, which, look, it happens. And I think Harry Reid decided that this was a step I need to take in order to make sure this president's agenda doesn't get stymied. But what he did was he stopped it short at the Supreme Court. What Mitch McConnell and Republicans have done is they've elevated it to the Supreme Court. And I think a real pressure point for Democrats now is, do you expand that further for things like democracy exceptions, like voting rights? They've already done it this year to accelerate the debt limit. I think the reason why he changed his mind on this is because he saw that the Senate was changing. The reason why the Senate is the Senate and the House is the House, and I say this as a former House staffer with all due respect to my folks in the House is where the passionate discussions and back and forth can happen where you can allow kind of the whims of everyday folks, I think, to be a little bit more easily interpreted. I think the Senate was designed to be a place for moderation and was designed to be a place where people could go and could talk and exchange ideas and come up with deals. That's changed because the content of that body has changed. And look, someone like Harry Reid, who grew up in that space and wanted to protect it at one point, I think understood and saw over the horizon where it was changing and where it was going. And I think it just reflects a reality that he got. And I think one of his political skills, by the way, was seeing around corners, seeing over the horizon, what was coming next. I think he perfected that at several points in his career.
Listen, before I let you go, Joel, because you worked with him, I want to ask you about any sort of personal memories of who the man was beyond the politician.
I smiled at so many of the personal remembrances for a couple of reasons. Look, working in communications for Harry Reid, you learn very quickly that like the flowery language and the niceties aren't what the job is about. It's not, you're not there to write soaring rhetoric. You're there to make sure that he can communicate with his constituents and that he can communicate with his caucus. And there's so many lessons that I learned about functional political communication. How do you move people? What's the power of words, the power of language? He understood that. He also understood the power of what not to say. So, you know, I appreciated the fact that people kind of got him. They understood that it wasn't just about being awkward, saying goodbye on phone calls, and it wasn't just about shunning the public spotlight, but it was about a greater purpose of public service.
Right. Joel Payne, thank you so much for painting such a great picture of the man.
Thank you.